guy does not need an introduction, but there's something you should know about Bobo. He has taken jobs and even chosen his college of choice based on the fact, is there possible Bigfoot habitation? And he finally succeeded in seeing a Bigfoot in 2001. And we all know Bobo is most famous for his Bigfoot calling skills. Everyone, please welcome James Bobo Fay.
Thank you. All right, howdy, Texas. This thing up higher? I'm actually nervous. I've never actually gave a presentation before at a conference or anything. I've always just been hanging out watching Cliff talk. If you've seen the show like a lot, if you've seen Finding Bigfoot a lot, raise your hands. Okay, if you see it like if you know what it is, raise your hands. Okay, all right. I didn't want to assume that people saw it and talk about stuff they didn't care about. So it was like, yeah, I started Bigfooting back in the 80s. I grew up down south in Southern California with some friends and I when we were in high school. Went to try to go find Bluff Creek and ditched school for a week and drove up there and drove around and got lost, didn't find anything. And but I loved it. That was up in Humboldt, so I went to Humboldt, stayed up there to college and worked with logging jobs with some native crews and never saw anything. And back then, we had some encounters, but we always thought it was other Indians out there messing with us, trying to steal our lunches. But we'd hear whistles and knocks. We'd be like 4,000 feet, wintertime, snow on the ground. And I'd be like, why do these Indian guys hide out in the snow just to steal a sandwich? And I remember John Green said you'll only have one Bigfoot encounter in your life if you're lucky. So I was thinking, well, these things are here all the time, so it couldn't be a Bigfoot. It's got to be some other guys out here just messing with us. And so I had some Bigfoot encounters, I think, but just didn't realize it at the time. I think a lot of people have the same experience. You don't know it's a Bigfoot until later on. But that's why it's titled The Bob's Babbles. So then I started. I hooked up originally with this guy, John Freitas, if you heard him. He's a Bigfooter in Northern California. He was a cop out there, and hooked up with him in the late 90s. And he kind of got me going. He put me on a TV show with him on the North America's 10 Scariest Spots. So that's kind of got my start in TV doing that. And then I did Monster Quest with Doug Hijek and Moneymaker and Autumn were the hosts, and actually Matt and Autumn were fighting so bad that Doug offered to fire Matt, hired me to take over the co-host job, but I didn't do it because I was in the BFR at the time. And then that kind of led into doing Monster Quest, and then from that we did, I don't know if any of you guys see that Bob Saget episode we did? Cliff and I and a bunch of guys did the Bob Saget episode. We did that, and then I had like 4 offers to do television shows, and I was pretty excited. So I was like, oh, we're finally going to get good equipment. And I was just psyched to have thermals and stuff like that. Because back then they were like 70 grand. So I was like, this is going to be great. And then we ended up signing with Discovery and doing Finding Bigfoot. And it's been a pretty crazy ride. We've been around 5 continents, 45 states. It's been a good run. But I was going to talk about a little bit about our Texas episodes. I'm sure you guys are almost all Texans here, right? Yeah. Then whenever we film Texas, we do Louisiana at the same time. So I kind of get mixed up sometimes which side of the border we were on, because we're always within like 10 or 15 miles. But if you saw that one episode, I'll give you a little behind the scenes stuff, where Moneymaker called that guy Shane. You guys all know Moneymaker. Yeah. He called that guy a liar. He said he didn't believe he saw one. And that guy ended up following us over here. He had a big knife. He said he was going to stab Moneymaker. We had to stop from trying to kill. And there was a lot of people who wanted to kill Matt, but I was one of them. Yeah, he was a the guy was the biggest jerk forever. Like, we couldn't stand him, like the whole crew. We all hated him. He was just total arrogant, like just self-centered and narcissist. And we went to China and he just was losing his mind. We were telling the network we can't work with this guy anymore. We had a 10-week break, came back, and the guy's been the coolest guy in the world ever since. But when we were in China, we were walking on this ledge. If you ever saw that episode, we were way up in the mountains. I remember looking right in front of me, I'm like, it's pitch black, no one can see us. If I just shove the guy, no one will ever know, and like, my life's gonna be so much easier. And I was seriously tempted. I was like, had my hand right there. I was like, I could just push this guy off and I'd be a hero. He's a pretty funny guy. So yeah, people usually love hearing the moneymaker stories. I'm trying to think which one I could tell without getting in trouble. But anyways, yeah. So we had we loved coming to Texas, man. We had some good stories. We always had great witnesses. You guys live in a great spot. Like when we first came down here, I knew Texas had some stuff going on, but when I come down and talk to you guys, it's just nuts down here, East Texas. It's incredible. And then just this trip now, talking to guys out below San Antonio area out there, how much you guys got out in the desert areas. You got reports out there. I was pretty impressed. And then when we were filming here, we were supposed to be in Texas, but I ended up going over to the Coushatta tribe, and some of the tribal members were here. And we had a new camera guy for going out in the field with us for the overnights. It's just, when we do our solo camps, it's just one guy. And this dude, he kind of BS'd his way into the job, overstated his resume. And we went out and the tribal members put me in this great spot. I did a call, and I got the best Ohio callback I ever got. And I was just so excited. It was just crystal clear, there's no wind, just still night, just whoa. And then about 5 seconds later, I got this super loud, one of the loudest wood knocks I've ever just crack off in the swamp. I look over at the guy, I'm like all excited, I'm talking into the camera, and the guy's, he's like, I wasn't rolling, I was saving the batteries. And if you guys squatch, you know, that stuff, like Murphy's Law is like good luck compared to Squatcher's Law. Like, we had so much stuff like that. And that was one of the most frustrating things about the show was we'd hear all this stuff. We'd, want people at home to hear it. And, we'd hear stuff loud and clear. Then we'd watch the show and you guys couldn't hear anything. For me, that was the most aggravating part of the show, was not, to let the people at home hear what we're hearing, because we could hear it so well. And then this drove you guys crazy too. They'd start playing music, like that scary music when you're trying to listen to the. I hate that too. Like, no one hated that show more than we did for the first several years. It was kind of we got signed because we were saying, we don't want to do anything fake. They told us it was going to be a documentary where they stayed out of our way, let us do what we wanted. They just follow us. And from the first day, we just started fighting because they were wanting us to fake. Because they all worked on another show. Our camera crew worked on a different reality, like travel, adventure, mystery show. I don't want to name it because I'll get in trouble, but I think a lot of you know who it was. And they did fake stuff so much. In our first episode, we went out. First time we were in Alaska for the pilot. There's a broken branch in the ground, and the producers all tell them it's a Bigfoot stuff and broke that branch. From right then, it just turned into like this huge fight. We fought the producers for years. It took a while for them to realize, like, well, if we don't fake stuff, it's more real. Our ratings trip, because the first 3 episodes, I don't know if you guys saw the first 3 episodes, but every night we saw something on thermal. And like I was filming a horse in Florida, and I was filming it head on, and the horse was emaciated, it was really thin, so it looked strange, but I identified it as a horse. I'm like, oh, it's a horse. So I quit filming it. The way they edited it is that I was filming a Bigfoot and just put the camera down and didn't film it anymore and let it walk off without showing it. And so we had some beefs with them about that, and a lot of screaming matches. I quit a couple times and they finally came around. But yeah, they told me if Sorry. But you guys might want to do a Q&A if you guys have any questions about the show. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm curious about Renee. Does she really and truly not believe that Bigfoot exists?
She asked me if Renee thinks Bigfoots really exist. We have to, Renee's job, she's not that dumb. Yeah. She,
What you might call the house,
she represents the people at home that don't believe. Because when the show started, 70% of the people that watched our show didn't believe in Bigfoot. They just watched it just for the travel and stuff like that. Then by the time the show, this last season we stopped, we had like, I think it was 65% were believers. So they switched around. But yeah, her job was to represent people at home that were saying like, well, what about this, what about that? Like, but she'd say like, oh, the Bigfoots did this, the Bigfoots did that. They'd have to reshoot it because she'd have to say it like, not affirmative, but she thinks they're like a ghost though. She doesn't think they're a species. She thinks they're like paranormal. Yes, ma'am.
have you had any intervention by any government presidents or interactions with government?
She's asked if we had any interference from the government. Do you mean like conspiracy? No, we never did. We never had, I don't bother there's this grand conspiracy. I think it's like a bunch of little cover-ups, just people watching their own back for their own sake of their job, not want to get called a nut job, so they just kind of put it to the side. This is my personal experience, but Lyle Laverty, if you guys know, he's the guy who took those really clear black and white photos of the PG film set, the Trackway. He ended up being the deputy Secretary of the Interior. He was the second highest guy in charge of like 50-something% of all federal land. But when he was a forester in the 70s, he had 2 sightings with his trail crew in Six Rivers National Forest south of Bluff Creek. So I know the second highest guy, the Interior Department, knew they were real, but he would never admit it. Yes, sir.
Does Renee still believe that it's more paranormal, or does she believe now more that it's that they're actually real?
She says they're spirits, that people are just seeing like a ghost kind of thing. But I don't know too many ghosts that like tear down trees and dig in trash cans and yeah, leave hair and footprints and scat and so.
Can you describe your experience that you saw?
Which one?
You saw more than one the first time?
Oh, the first time? Have you guys all heard this story before? Okay, well, I was looking for a long time. I live up in Northern California by the Redwoods, and I looked and looked, never had stuff happen. Then I had my first encounter. I was never afraid in the woods. I never was scared. Like I never worried about carrying a gun or anything like that. I just had no bad thoughts out there. And I went out and this guy John Freitas, he was a cop in Northern California. I think I mentioned him before. He called me up, and this is 2001 when cell phones up there were really bad, like reception was bad. I thought he told me that there was a Bigfoot sighting that day, and it was this spot that I knew real well. It was up behind Redwood National Park. It was actually due west of Bluff Creek by about 10, 12 miles. And right, just directly across from the film site, across the Klamath River, and I got the message, and I couldn't hear it too well, and I was like, it was today, and I ripped up there, and I had borrowed a night vision scope. It was the first time I had a real night vision scope. It was a Generation 2, like 1990s Ukrainian model. I mean, nowadays it'd just be garbage, but for me, I was pretty stoked. So I go out there, and I'm just doing, my throat's thrashed now. I can't really do calls too much anymore. I blew my vocal cords out, but I used to be able to do really, really loud calls that were pretty good. And I was doing these calls, and I was just sitting back in a beach chair, and every once in a while I'd grab this oak branch, this big oak log, and was whacking it pretty hard. And I mean, I've been doing this for years and years, never had anything happen. And all of a sudden to the north, I started hearing a wolf howl. And I was like, well, that's odd, because I used to have a roommate in college that had a Malamute wolf hybrid. And I thought, well, that sounds like that. And then I was listening to it, like, that's a strange wolf. I was thinking, like, well, no one even lives there. It's 11 miles to the next house that direction. So I was thinking, it must be loose. And then I'll never forget, it just let out, a lot of you people, talking to you guys out in line, I mean, it sounds like a lot of you guys have heard of Bigfoot. When you hear a Bigfoot the first time, when you know, like, in your soul that you just heard a Bigfoot for the first time, I'll just never forget that scream and yell that just blew my mind. And then it kept coming closer and closer, coming down. I was on top of a ridge line. It was north of me. The ridge ran north-south. So I was sitting in that chair just pretty excited. It took it 40 minutes to get to where I was. I could hear it coming closer, closer, closer. I'm like, God, that thing's miles away. And I was sitting there in that beach chair just chilling. I had the night vision scope in my lap, and I had a big machete laying on the ground next to me, and I thought I was gonna be able to, like, run up to a Bigfoot, take a picture with a snap throwaway camera with a little flash on it. I was a little naive. That was cool, because John had told me, he goes, well, that one up there was real aggressive. It's a big male, it's aggressive. It's gonna bluff charge you, but don't worry, it'll stop 10 feet from you and stop and scream. And I'm like, when it stops and screams, I'm gonna jump and do a barrel roll and grab some hair. And people used to say I was crazy, and I look back, I'm like, God, now I know why they said that. That sounds pretty crazy, but I thought, why not? I'll probably get kicked or something, but I'll get the hair. And so I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden that thing came real close, and I was sitting in this, behind me was the dirt road that went down to this Indian village, and it paralleled the park. And it was about probably 50, 40 something yards behind me. There was a thicket of trees about 30 yards long by about 10 yards deep, some cedar and pine. It was real thick. Then for about, I don't know, 70, 80 yards, it'd be like a crescent-shaped meadow around me with a tree line around it. And I was sitting away from the road, facing into the meadow, and I was facing 12 o'clock, like due east basically. And I started roaring back at this thing. This thing was roaring. I was roaring back, just going like really aggressive, like, like that stuff, and trying to antagonize. I wanted to run at me so I could grab some hair. And when that thing came in the tree line, it just let out this roar, like, it kind of sounds like the Boggy Creek movie, like where they mix the Boggy Creek, Legend of Boggy Creek, that roars, they mixed, I think, tiger, lion, and elephant, and bear, or something like that. And that's exactly what this sounded like. Then right then, that was at my 9 o'clock, coming from the north. And my 2 o'clock, I heard the loudest wood knock I ever heard. It sounded like Barry Bonds when he was on steroids, just hitting a tree, just whack. It was the loudest whack. And I was like, oh my God, there's two of them, and I was all stoked. And they just started marching, just stopping, breaking branch. You know how loud they can be. Like, they're trying to be loud. These things were trying to be loud. And they marched, and they met directly right at my 12 o'clock in front of me. Never saw them, and they were in the tree line. This went on for like about an hour and 45 minutes, and I was, trying to antagonize them. And at one point, this big, like 4 foot, about 2 foot across log got chucked out of the tree line. It came probably about 50 yards out. It had to weigh 150, 180 pounds at least. And it flew like 50 yards there and just went thud in front of me. And I started, well, that's getting a little more sketchy, but I was still excited, thinking it didn't hit me. So I kept doing real aggressive calls at it, and I was tripping out. And there was these big oak trees, and they were like 70 foot tall, some of them. They were big. They weren't real thick, but they were big. And all of a sudden they'd just start whipping around, like it looked like it was blowing a gale wind, just the trees just shaking, the leaves, everything was just wishing back. Like the top's moving like 15 feet. And I was like, the strength of these things, I was just blown away. But I still wasn't scared, really. I was just pretty excited to get my hair. And at one point, I used to remember, it was some kind of cry. I can't remember exactly how it went now, but I heard like this weird cry sound, like a sharp, I can't even imitate it. And all of a sudden, the second that sound happened, they rushed me. There was for sure 2, but I think there was a third one there too. I couldn't tell for sure, but you think when you're at the horse tracks and at the horse races and the horses go by and the ground shakes? That's what it felt like. The ground shook. And I was like, oh my God, they ran behind me. And they went around the thicket and it went dead quiet. And I was like, oh my God. Then I was starting to get scared a little bit. But they weren't around. And then all of a sudden, it sounded like a mouse crawling behind me. And I was sitting there going, dang, what's going on? I was just kind of tripping out. I thought, well, I had this 105-pound pit bull in my truck, my dog D-Day, and he was ferocious. He'd guard that truck. He was fearless, and he was a nice dog out of the truck, but in the truck, he was like a killer, just snapping anything that came by the car. So I'm like, well, they didn't go by the truck because he'd be going crazy, so they must have just kept going on the other side of the road and went down the hill. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear this mouse behind me, it sounds like, and I'm sitting there just listening, all of a sudden I hear this rustling right, like 5 feet, just right to my right shoulder, and I just start hearing, and it went lower and lower and lower. And it's got to where you couldn't really hear it, but the lower it went, the more I was feeling like I got goosebumps thinking about it now, but it felt like someone took a ray gun and started shooting me in the back of my neck, like between my shoulder blades and my neck. And it felt like I was just getting almost electrocuted, it felt like. I mean, I don't know if they can do infrasound or if that's just totally psychosomatic, and it was just my fear from this thing growling that it felt like I was getting, zapped or whatever they call it. But man, I started hyperventilating, my eyes started watering. I thought, well, I gotta I'll get its picture. And this sounds kind of loony and stuff, but I hear other people talk about it. People talk about like that thought projection, like mind speak stuff, where you hear like a message from them. I remember I grabbed the camera and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take this picture, I'm gonna snap it and then run. And I was gonna right when I was gonna turn around, I got this, I mean, it could have just been my own brain making this message, but it said, if you take my picture, I'm gonna kill you and you're never gonna find your body. And I just was like, whoa. And my eyes were watering real bad, I was hyperventilating, and I was shaking real bad, I was just scared, I was scared to death. So I ran around, I just got up, and I couldn't even really run, I was all off balance, I was wobbly. I went around this thicket and got back to my truck, and my pit bull was black. It was just a little standard cab, 2-wheel drive, little old 83 Toyota truck. And so I get to the truck and I look in there and I don't see him, he's gone. I thought, oh my, because the doors weren't locked, I thought, these things just opened my door and killed my dog. And I was flipping, I opened the door, I get in. Well, he had climbed down in below where your feet go and started tearing out underneath the dashboard, like all the heater and vents and the glove box, and just was he had his head wedged up in there. He never made a sound, he was flipped out, just scared to death. I jumped in the truck, and I was pointed down away from the way I needed to go. It was a narrow dirt logging road. So I went down about 200 yards, and I found a place to turn around, and I backed up, and it was a little drop off, about 9-inch drop off, and when I went to pull back out, my tires started spinning and kicking up dirt. I'm like, oh, I don't want to bury my tires like some horror movie gets stuck. So I jumped out real quick with a flashlight to look, and I go, okay, I can get out of this. And right then I just get this scream. The thing had come, because I drove down there about 40 miles an hour, and it was right behind me. It just started running down the hill. I didn't see it, but it just tore down the hill, just ripping up bushes and breaking branches and just roaring. I jumped in the truck and just flew. It was about 18 miles down to the nearest place. There was an old logging mill down there, and they didn't run 24 hours a day back then. It was just a daytime shift. And I pull in there, I ripped in there, just full power slide, skidding, just almost ran into the guard shack. And I jumped out of the truck. I said, dude, get in my truck. I got Bigfoot screwed up the hill. You gotta come up and hear this. And I'm just yelling at this guy, and he's just looking at me all big-eyed. I'm like, come on, let's go. There's Bigfoots up there. You gotta be a witness. And I've never seen that guy since, but I'd love to hear that guy's story someday about the big crazy guy that came in and tried to make him get in his truck to go hear a Bigfoot up the mountain. But, so anyways, that was the end of that. Then 5 nights later, I went up there with a couple of these cops, and we were call blasting, and I forgot that night vision. I was so excited to go back out there. I left the night vision on the porch when I was loading my truck, And my buddy, I got a hold of him, and he was gonna go surfing up where we were at, kind of up that way, like Klamath River. So I called him up and I said, hey, dude, bring that, I'll give you whatever you want, just bring that up, that night vision up here. And he came up. This guy had never gone squatching in his life, wasn't interested, didn't even believe in it. He was there for 20 minutes. He hung out. We barbecued some abalone. He went diving that day. So we usually try to cook something to put some smell in the air. And so we heard a scream from down the hill. We're like, oh my God, this thing's still around. So we went up into this clear cut. We're looking down the edge of the clear cut. And this dude's there for 20 minutes. And all of a sudden we see that I'm looking, and next to my truck, see this, I didn't notice this big burnt out stump right next to the truck. I'm like, how could I park next to this giant stump and not see it? Because all the trees were like 6 to 9 inches. It was like fourth regrowth, it was just little pecker poles. And we were about 200 yards below the state, or the Redwood National Park, so there was like 350 foot redwood trees all along the ridgeline for 200 yards up for miles. This was clear cut. There was one section of regrowth down there. And I just see all of a sudden that stump just stood up and walked into the tree line. And then it would pop out. There was this one spot where you could see into the forest about 50 yards down the hill from it. It was like a rectangular shape, like I was up here, the road went like this, and this down here was the regrowth, and all this was clear cut. We were standing up on this stump up there looking down this way, my truck's down here, and it would pop up down here in the tree line more. And it turned out that was, if you guys ever heard of Dave Paulides, he wrote the Hoopa Project, the book on the Native Americans. Well, that trail from the Hoopa tribe that went to the coast, they can't log it. So there's big trees still along the trail because it's a sacred site, so the logging companies don't cut it. Well, I didn't know that at the time, but that's why this thing was standing on that trail. And I swear to God, it was bobbing. I remember looking at it, I looked at my buddy and go, it's a giant freaking monkey, because it was going like this. It would bob up on, it would bob twice on one side, like raise its arm and leg at the same time, and then go once on the other side, back and forth. Then it would kind of lean forward and walk over to this tree and stand behind it. And it would, just its head was hidden, both the shoulders were hanging out on either side. I'm like, this thing's not very smart. Like, it's like an ostrich with its head in the sand, like thinks you can't see it, because I can't see his face, but his whole body's hanging out each side. And we thought it was like maybe like a 9-inch thick tree or something like that, because its head fit behind it and that was it. Then it would walk over behind this stump. The stump came right between the belly button and the chest. So we're looking at it going, man, that thing is so whack. Because when we saw it next to the truck, we were passing the scope back and forth for about 20 minutes. When it stood next to the truck, its shoulders were as broad as the hood of the truck from the windshield to the headlights, the length of the hood. It was, like pushing 4 foot. When it turned sideways, about 3 foot thick to the chest. And we go stand behind that stump, it only came up above its belly button. So we thought, well, it must be like a 4-foot stump. So that thing's like 7 foot tall, 4 foot wide, 3 foot thick. The next morning we went down there and measured it. It was 6'9" stump. So we figured that thing had to be about 10 foot. We found a 17 3/4 inch track, about 9 inches across the ball. So I mean, it was a big one. And my truck didn't even dent the soil there. This thing pressed in about 3/4 inch deep on the ball of the foot. And our trucks left just a little scuff mark. So the thing was massive. So that was my first sighting and the first time I was scared of a Bigfoot. Any other questions? Oh yeah. Well, there's Monkey. If you guys watch the show, that's a Squatch dog, Monkey. And people always ask me about her. Like, what is she? Her dad was a 15-pound wire-haired Jack Russell Terrier. And her mom was this big 130-pound bear hunting half pit bull, half wolfhound. And this old redneck guy, he had the wolfhound penned up when she was in heat. And he said, yeah, all them dogs come around, but that little bastard could slip through the cracks in the fence. And I come out there one morning and she's snoring, he's just pumping away, and these things popped out a little bit later. And so I think that dog's got a hashtag #MeToo on its Facebook page now. But so the Jack Russell was such a known terror that every time it had puppies, they had to be shot before they were a year old, because it was out in ranch country. They'd go around killing lambs and chickens, and it was just a little killer. So the guy put all the puppies into a burlap bag with a rock, went to the Alder Point Bridge, which is 165 feet up, and he threw it in the river. And this hippie was swimming down there, and he said, hey, don't litter to the river. And the old man yelled out, he goes, I ain't littering, I'm getting rid of puppies. And so the hippie swam out there and grabbed the bag, pulled it out, Monkey was the only one that lived. So then I got her, then when she was a month old, they bottle raised her, she was only 3 days old. She was super tiny, she was laying out in this guy's front yard, and some tweaker guy, came in yelling at his neighbor, came down yelling about some imaginary crime. And when he left, he did some donuts in his front yard, tearing it up, and drove her Monkey and shot her like 70 feet through the air and slammed into the barn, broke 3 legs, all her ribs, crushed her pelvis, all this and that. She got put into a full body cast and all torn up, and that was just the first month of her life. So she's pretty nuts, pretty tough. So yeah, and my only daylight setting I ever had was at Louse Camp. You guys heard of Louse Camp? Bluff Creek? It's right below the film site. That's the only time I ever saw one was because of her. She fully alerted, and I was bending down to get, because we heard knocks and whistles and rocks being thrown that day, and my truck had just got broken into the week before, and I had my video camera stolen, my recorder, but I had one auto recorder left, and I had it stashed underneath the seat, and I went to go get it, because it was 105 degrees that day, and I was not expecting to have any squatch. We were just looking for prints walking up and down the river bar, and we started getting rocks thrown over us and all this. So I went back to the truck to get the recorder, and right when I was bending down is when I saw long hair. My hair was kind of covered, kind of obscuring the side of my face, but I saw Monkey look, and I just kind of looked to the side, and I saw this big, tall, super skinny one, like half leaned out behind a tree, just for like it was just a flash, and it jumped back behind a tree, I guess, because I looked and looked, and I thought I hallucinated it or something, because it was so strange looking. It was so thin, because I'd seen the other ones at night. I'd seen silhouettes, and they were just huge, bulky, just brick, like a brick house, This thing was looked like Manute Bol, that old basketball player. Was like 7'6" and 190 pounds. This thing looked like a skeleton wrapped in fur, but it was really shiny black with a silver sheen to it. Like it was totally groomed, like it looked meticulously clean, short hair, all even, maybe a little bit longer on the arms. I just got a real quick look. And the only thing I remember about the face area was I could see the eye, and there was a brow ridge that caused a shadow, and I remember thinking I should have seen some moisture of the eye or something. I should have seen something like a little glint of the eye, but like that brow ridge was so pronounced, I just looked like a cave. I thought, God, did I just imagine that? And I walked up there, and Monkey was freaking out. And it was just that thick, pungent smell, and there was no wind that day. And for about 10 minutes, you could walk back and forth, like 30 feet, walk through it, walk out, walk 10 feet, not smell it, walk back through. Then I started hearing all these rocks rolling down, and I started tracking it. It went up and climbed up, went up Onion Mountain Way, and if you ever heard of that place, it's where John Green did a bunch of research back in the 60s, got those tracks. So she was responsible for my only daytime glimpse. I'm still trying to get a really good glimpse. Right. Which one's, how do you go forward? Oh, that's a mistake. This is my first presentation I was putting together didn't come out too hot. You can skip that. Oh, that was in Texas. These guys brought those dogs out. And I don't know if did you guys see that Texas episode we filmed with the dogs? That was pretty nuts, because Cliff, that dog, these things are trained killers. They train for like the SEALs and special forces, cops. And Cliff was holding the walkie-talkie, and the dog must have thought it was a weapon and just lunged and just missed. I mean, it would have tore Cliff's, it missed by like 3-4 inches. But those handlers, they just did it as a lark, just like to get on TV. But when those dogs, I was the dog that scented it, that dog went crazy for a long time. They didn't show on the show either was where the dog was going nuts. It was a massive this really big, wide game trail, like a Squatch trail. It was, if you've seen those Squatch highways that they use regular, They're real wide, way wider than any deer or pig path. Beaten down, and there was 2 from each side, kind of made like an X coming across the trail right there, and that dog went just nuts. But this crazy, there was tornado warnings and high winds and heavy hail and rain. It was lots of lightning. It got real bad storm. So we had to go in, and we didn't. We never got up to him, but we could hear him howling off in the distance over the wind. We heard the squatches. We definitely heard the squatches howling that night. And those dog handlers were so flipped out at how those dogs reacted, because they trained them for primate smell. And those dogs were ruined. They could never. They're like $9,000 dogs, but they could never. After they trained them to track primate, they could never track a human or do that. So all they could do after that was security work. Can you skip to the next one? Okay, this is Beverly and Wiley's place we went to. It was a little behind this. You go to they had a menagerie down there, all kinds of animals. You go to the next one. That's another mistake. Can you skip one more? There should be one other one in the yard. No, I guess it's gone. I don't know what happened. I lost most of my pictures last night. But a little side note was kind of cool is they had about 80 fighting cocks down there, like just little pens all over. They didn't fight them anymore. They were all retired, but they still had 80 roosters out there. And you know the country singer Charlie Pride? That's where he kept all his birds. Was where these Bigfoots were showing up and stealing some of the birds. It was that guy, old Charlie Pride's birds. Anyone else got a question? See, Red Hat. Excuse me? Oh yeah, we definitely had people try to hoax us all the time. A couple times, well, you have to be careful because you don't want to call them a liar because you could be wrong, like they might be telling the truth, or maybe they just mixed something up, like mixed up a detail that you caught that makes it sound not real. And we didn't want to call people liars on camera because we didn't want to make other people afraid, like, well, they might not believe me and call me a liar, you know? I mean, Moneymaker would. He'd start scowling at people and just give them like the evil eye, and they'd get nervous and start. He'd just stare at them, just stare at them, and start rolling his eyes at them and making guffawing sounds. And so, but that guy Squatch Master, I think his name was, in Ohio. Cliff got that video clip cleaned up, and you can see the guy wearing jeans and this and that. So we called that guy, but I had one guy caught lying. If you ever watched the show, if you ever see the reruns, I'm not going to say where it was, but he's a nice guy. But he describes the face and the expression of the face. Then I started asking him details about it. He goes, I couldn't see the face. It never looked at me. It was just looking straight ahead. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious on the show the guy's lying, but I just let it go. You know, he was helping us out and I just didn't want to wreck the guy on TV like that, but I figured people at home would catch it. And yes, sir.
What advice would you give to kids who want to start squatching?
What advice to give to kids?
What would you give it? What advice?
Yes, what advice for kids to start squatching? I'd read all the John Green books and well, it depends how old they are, I guess. He's old enough. Yeah, I'd read all his books. You could, especially I like the older books, you know, John Green, and then Dr. Meldrum, Bindernagel, Steenberg's got some good ones. I mean, there's so many books now, but if you start with those old classic ones, you know, like before there was a lot of hoaxing going on, I like those ones. Then, I mean, if you're like, I run into people all the time that are like in their 20s and 30s that went to school as anthropologists and biologists just to they want to, they're hoping Bigfoot gets discovered and they can get a job in it someday. So definitely study the sciences, and like Cliff uses math all the time. Cliff does all the ratios, you know, for like algebraic equations and stuff, and geometry, figuring out distance and size of creatures. So you need to know math, science. Those will definitely help you out. I mean, if you're, because guys like us aren't going to be doing this. When they're discovered, we're gone. It's going to be all PhDs and grad students, that kind of thing. Orange shirt?
Yes, I'd like to know how many people in this area of Texas have actually seen something, raise their hand.
So people from Texas and like this part of Southeast Texas, who has seen a Bigfoot? Could you raise your hand, please? I don't know, probably, was there 20, 18? Yeah, almost 20. Can you guys hold your hands up? We're going to get a picture. Could you, yeah, how about if you stand up? If you've seen one, could you stand up, please? Yeah, I thought it'd be more, actually. I guess I heard a lot of stories people saw them other places.
Y'all asked about East Texas in general.
Okay. Then, I don't know if people want to keep standing up. Yes, ma'am.
Did the show ever go to Michigan, like the Porcupine Mountains?
Yeah, we went to the UP. Yeah. She asked if we went to Upper Michigan. Yes, we went up there.
Did you have any action?
Yeah, we heard some stuff up there. Oh, actually, I think we were on the main. Yeah, we did hear stuff up there one night. We heard some really good stuff down on the main part, like when people from Michigan always go like this, right here. Yeah, we were here. We heard some stuff. Well, then people have been asking me about the show a lot. We were never canceled. They just didn't renew more episodes because we were so expensive. Because we hit 100 episodes and we got bonuses, and we have 4 hosts, and they can do a show with a vet that lives at home that doesn't travel and keep the cost way down. But they're going to start airing reruns on this. They're sold our reruns to Travel Channel. So they're going to see how our ratings go on Friday nights. We're going to start airing this in a couple weeks. And then if we hit, they haven't told us what the number is, but if we hit a certain rating, they're going to send us out just doing like 2-hour specials, which would be pretty cool. Chris Moneymaker is Matt Moneymaker's cousin, and that is their real name. They were German immigrants like in the 1700s, and their name was Gildschmacher. They were the coin makers. And the guy at Ellis Island said, okay, Moneymaker. And Moneymaker's dad, his name's Rich Moneymaker, and he's a famous bankruptcy attorney. I swear to God, if you go to law school, you read about Rich Moneymaker, the bankruptcy laws and cases he's won. That's his real name. Yes, sir.
What are you up to these days? Do you have anything planned for the future? Are you out there researching still? Or?
I haven't been out as much lately. Cliff's been out all the time. Right when the show started, I was going to take a break because I'd been pretty hardcore for years and years, and just that's all I did. Like my whole life was just focused on going out in the woods. I was like, I'm going to start surfing more again and going to town and do stuff in town and kind of have more of a normal life. Then all of a sudden, right when I was going to do that, we got picked up, and then it was like I was sucking it another 7 years straight, nonstop. And then, I mean, I still go out. If there's something happens, I'll go check it out. Like if I hear something in my area, like sighting or tracks or something like that, I'll go. Or someone's been hearing one, I'll go check it out. But I gotta say, I mean, I've had so many hunters and people tell me, like, oh man, you should hear this thing, and it's almost always a coyote. Like real experienced, woodsmen will tell me, like, it's definitely a squatch, and it's almost always a coyote. Any other questions?
Have they ever been known to run with the coyote?
Oh, she asked, are Sasquatches known to run with coyotes? And I've said this on the show a few times, and Renee said it was a lie, but it's true. I found it on Nat Geo. Baboons over in, or monkeys, I can't remember if they're baboons or monkeys, in India kidnap puppies and raise them to be their guard dogs. So when the monkeys or the baboons sleep, the dogs are awake and the dogs guard the monkeys when they're sleeping. So if they do that, I wouldn't doubt, I mean, I don't know, but I don't think it's too far-fetched to go to Squatch, might grab some coyote pups and raise them up, you know, help them hunt or whatever. It's possible. But they're definitely, I mean, they eat a lot of the same things, meat-wise, so you know, they're in the same areas. They're both, you know, eating rabbits and deer and that sort of thing. Yes, sir. He asked why we don't get more pictures from trail cameras. I've seen some awesome photos from trail cameras, like this. Some of them are like series, like 6, 7 photos in a row that would blow people's minds, and people will not release them because they don't want to blow out their property or their hunting lease, whatever it is. Usually, they don't want to mess up their hunting, or you get people that have them in their property. And they just don't want, they kind of feel protective of them, you know, they don't want anyone coming messing with their Sasquatches. But and also like Lyle Blackburn was talking last night, alpha male coyotes have been proven to avoid game cameras. And most hunters don't camouflage their game cameras, and Squatches can see them, they got great vision. And I think another thing that happens too is that we know they can see infrared light spectrum. And I think what happens at night, like whether it's a deer goes by or a leaf blows in front of it or some branches wave and that camera starts shooting off that infrared flash, I think they see it and they'll mark in their mind like there's one over there. But they definitely avoid them, for sure. They're conscious of them, that's for sure. I mean, one night I was out and I had 8 game cameras, real nice Reconyxes, and I always face them away from the moon so that you don't see that. I always face them north, so that you're not going to catch any glint of the lens. And I camo them real good. And we heard it had to be 2 Squatches walking. We were way, way out. It's the most remote place you can get in California. And we were out there, and I was with my dad. And when these things walk by, you could hear them just stomping big, long, heavy steps, just crunch. You know when a Squatch walks by, you know it's them, those big, long, heavy steps. They went around the camp, and I was like, oh my God, I got him. First light I got out there, every single camera had been, the ones that were wired that had been pulled, every one of them was laying face down in the grass, or whatever, the ferns, or where they were at. And I never even heard them break stride. Like they just walked along and just knocked them down as they walked. Like they weren't like looking around. I couldn't figure it out. I think we have time for maybe one more right here. Oh, infrared. About Bigfoots and infrared? Just because how they act, like we put them up and they avoid them every time, and sometimes they'll smash them. They'll just smash the camera. I haven't had mine smashed, but I know guys in Oregon have had a lot of cameras smashed. But when people are freaked out by Bigfoots, I'm like, you don't want that Bigfoot around your house, put up a couple of game cameras. It'll keep them far away. Or hire a film crew to come around. Someone else out there. Oh, way in the back? Ma'am? Yeah. Well, no. Can someone yell it for her? Oh, she's asked about when we went to Mount Shasta. My favorite part, probably going to those caverns where all the crystals and all that was. That was kind of a goofy episode, you know. That was. Sorry. They were trying to tap into that whole, because paranormal is way more popular than Bigfoot. So they were trying to bring in that audience. I mean, we definitely jumped the shark here and there, you know, like Hawaii and stuff like that. But free trip, so I was. We have time for one more? Oh, okay, over here.
What do you think about Todd Standing's work?
What do I think of Todd Standing's work? I like Todd. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a mix of things. I think Todd, he goes to really good areas. He's a good outdoorsman. I think Meldrum thinks he saw one with him, but he faked the footage. That footage is fake, and these guys have proven it. They're going to release a whole report on it. I've seen some of the stuff they've detailed, and he definitely faked the footage. But I think his heart's I think he's a mixture of his heart's in the right place, like he wants to protect them, but he's also trying to get, you know, rich and famous. So that's just maybe I'm wrong, but that's my take on it. But it's a pretty entertaining movie he made. I love it when he goes running and crawls in water when it's freezing out and all that stuff. But when we filmed with him, he showed us the footage and he recreated it. And man, that thing that ran up the hill, the one that runs up the hill, when he recreated it, we weren't at the exact same spot, but it was similar. And they didn't put this in the show, but it moves the exact same as he moves, like exactly. So, I don't know. I don't believe any of that footage is real. Because they got photos of the actor, the one that really looks real, it's alive. It was some big black dude up in Canada that they paid to. Todd's sister's a high, top-notch special effects artist, and they have photos she took them down, but she had photos on her website of masks that she made, showing how good she is doing special effects. And that's what you see in the video, and the eye blink is they've shown that's a CGI program. So yeah, so it's fake. Are we done? All right, well, I'll be out there at my booth if you guys have any more questions. You can ask me then. Thanks.
If you liked this video, be sure to check out our other content and get connected on our page and social media sites. Every day, new discoveries are being made all across the world and beyond, so let's work together to find out what's next. And remember, we won't know if we don't go. I'll see you in the Vortex.